Welcome, everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm Marco, and I'm represented today the Agile Gothenburg organization that and with the goal that we have to provide to our community, to learn and share some knowledge about Agile, the Agile mindset, and also the practices regarding Agile. And today we're going to be having David with us talking about the Kanban Maturity Model, a playbook for the evolutionary change. Yeah, that's really exciting title, and I'm really looking forward to hear more about what David is coming to speak today. But before we get into that, I just would like just to share a little bit, really briefly, about some technicalities about the meetup today. So during the meetup, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. You can just write them on the chat. But we will also, just to remind everyone that we will also have like a few time, of course, in the end of the workshop today, for Q&As, right? So then you can just like ask in the end of the meetup. So, but yeah, you keep the question with yourself, and then in the end we're gonna have like the questions, the time for everyone to ask some questions. This meetup also is being recorded. So in case you have any issues with that, just let us know. But if you can just, if you feel more comfortable, you can just like keep your camera off, and that's also okay for us. Yes, and I think that was, yeah, that was it. Just let's try to remind ourselves to keep our microphones muted, so we are not disturbing David when he's like sharing his knowledge with us today. So talking about David, right, David? Yeah, like David is really have like such a long professional experience in Agile methodology, having served like a role such Agile trainer, Scrum Master, software developer across various industries. Let's see, like he is also a certified Scrum and Kanban trainer. If I'm correctly, David is ICA Agile, right?
I see Agile trainer as well, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Yes. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. And also a co-author for 2 Agile books, right? Contributing to Agile community globally. Yeah, yeah. And I also can see, David, that you are a guitar player. Is that correct? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, I started playing guitar around about 17 years old, and kind of just as a hobby that I've had over the years. Played in a couple of bands, nothing too serious really, but yeah, quite a fun hobby to have. Nowadays I don't get as much time as I'd like to practice, so please don't ask me to play anything, because it would just be an embarrassment.
I was just like to ask if we should expect some like solo in between of the
Oh, no.
presentation or something. No, yeah. Oh no, but amazing, David. So yeah, please, yeah. Let's move on with you. I wish like yeah, that we all have some fun here today. And yeah, David, yeah, up to you.
All right, let me share my screen, make sure I get the right one. So hopefully you can see my screen. It's a big orange one with our title. So thank you so much, Marco, for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me, Agile Gothenburg, to talk this evening. I've got about an hour's worth of presentation. There'll be some interactive elements. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything that will make you feel embarrassed or anything like that. Just a few questions that will get you to think about and see what you think about them. I'm happy to do Q&A for as long as anybody will talk to me at the end as well. So I know that we're finishing after about 90 minutes, but I'm happy to hang around and deal with any questions or talk about anything that you want to beyond the official time limit as well. So I'm going to talk about the Kanban methods and the Kanban Maturity Model. We call this a playbook for evolutionary change. So Marco's done a great introduction, so I won't dwell on this too much. If you do want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can see my name there. Just go to LinkedIn/David-Spinks. There's my email address there. Just to add a little bit more detail to Marco's introduction, I actually began my career in IT as a software developer back in 2001. I did that for about just over 10 years before I got into this Agile thing. I became a Scrum Master around about 2012. And as Marco said, I've worked with lots of different teams, individuals and organizations, and lots of different industries practicing Scrum, but also other ways of being Agile, such as using the Kanban method, such as introducing XP practices. I'm an accredited trainer, both with Kanban University and also a trainer with a Scrum.org as well. I think it's important to mention this because I don't get too tribal about ways of being Agile. I don't subscribe to the arguments of Scrum is better than Kanban or Kanban is better than Scrum. For me, as an Agile coach, as an Agile practitioner, I think it's important to understand lots of different ways, different tools of being Agile, and understanding when we can apply them in context. So like I say, I don't get too involved in those sorts of this methodology versus that one. As Marco mentioned, I'm also a co-author. A couple of books have been mentioned there, Adopting Agile Across Borders. This is all about the impact that culture has on Agile adoptions. Mastering Collaboration in a Product Team. This is a collection of tools and techniques that teams can use to develop great products. And I've got a book coming out later in the year called Facilitating Professional Scrum Teams. I work through my company called Red Tangerine, which I co-founded, and this is the company through which I offer my training and consulting. But enough about me. Let's talk about the Kanban method and KMM. So I'm going to kick off with a question for you. What does Kanban mean to you? I'm sure some of you are applying some of the Kanban practices or principles. Some of you might be working with Kanban teams, but I'd like to get an idea of what Kanban means to you. Now, the way that we're going to do this is to use the tool called Mentimeter. So I can see that some people are putting things into the chat window already. That's great. But if you could go to this address, so open up another tab, maybe on your phone, somewhere like that. In the chat window, you need to go to menti.com and you need to enter the code that you can see on the screen, 55448065. I'm going to put that into the chat as well. And if the technology is being kind, you should get a screen with asking you these questions. And as you enter them, your answers will appear on the presentation screen. So we can already see we've got flow, board, pull, big picture, visualization. Oh, wow, look, lots of things coming in. Identifying bottlenecks. Yep, I like that one. Whip limits, of course. Yep, whip limits, whip, flow. I like the fact that flow has come up. Flow is a big word that we use in Kanban communities. Effectiveness, I like that one, effectiveness. Evolutionary, that's a really good word. Pragmatic, yeah. Pragmatic is a word that we use a lot at Kanban University. We talk about a pragmatic method. Prioritization, I can see. Agile methods. Options. Option, I like the word there. Less or no sprint rules. Yeah. Yeah, certainly a lot less prescriptive in terms of rules than some other methodologies like Scrum, for example. Well, I'll give you a couple more seconds. I see working on the most important thing. No sprint planning. Yeah, we don't have those prescribed meetings like we might have in Scrum. Cool. Okay. Good. Lots of good things there. So let me move this away. I'm going to ask you some other questions with Menti a little bit later on, so don't close that tab yet. Before we talk about the Kanban Maturity Model, I first need to talk about the Kanban method. Now, I know that you had a talk and a previous meetup that gave you an introduction to the Kanban method. So think of this as kind of a little revision of what the Kanban method is, because without understanding what the Kanban method is, it's quite difficult to really talk about the Kanban maturity model. All things are interlinked. So going back to the history, the word Kanban, and here's another pub quiz, future pub quiz question for you. The word Kanban is often confused around what it actually means. Some people will tell you that it means a sign or a visual board. Some people will talk about Kanban cards. Some people will say it means signal. In fact, Kanban means all of these things. There's different versions of the word Kanban in the Japanese language, in the Chinese languages, and all of these different ideas of using signs, visual boards, signals, they're all part of the Kanban method. So notice here, K, Kanban with a small k, to describe things like visual boards, signals. I've got capital K, Kanban, where I'm describing the Kanban method. So this is a method pioneered by a person called David Anderson. And he created this while he was working at Microsoft in the mid-2000s. Now, David was an Agile manager. He was working with software development teams. And although he was seeing benefits with Agile, he was also thinking about other ways of working. For example, the Toyota production system, where Kanban, with a small k, is used a lot in manufacturing. So again, a lot of people think about Kanban and relate it to manufacturing. Okay, so David took some of those ideas from Toyota and added it alongside his thinking from Agile with other things like lean, like theory of constraints. There's something called systems thinking. So he drew on all of these different communities, these different ways of thinking to create a new method, which he happened to call the Kanban method. So the takeaway from this is a lot of people think Kanban is related to manufacturing. Originally it was, but what David has done is kind of bring some of those elements along with other ways of knowledge managing complex work into a new method, which he called the Kanban method. So it's designed for knowledge work. And by knowledge work, we mean the type of work where we're dealing with intangibles. We're doing work such as marketing or sales or creative writing or software development, for example. We're using our minds, our brains, we're being creative. So this is what we mean by knowledge work. You know, not manufacturing, we're actually creating in different ways. So Kanban has spread beyond IT and it's used in many service industries. And again, notice that I'm using K, capital case K there, the Kanban method is now used in many different service industries. So what is the Kanban method? So it's a method to manage that knowledge work that I've been speaking about. It is a set of principles and practices, and these principles and practices guide how work is managed and how we improve the processes to do work. We do this using Kanban boards and Kanban systems. So notice, again, more uses of this word Kanban. When I say Kanban, I could be talking about Kanban boards, Kanban systems. All of this is part of the Kanban method. Now, what Kanban is not, it's not technically an Agile framework. Why? Because it was created in the mid-2000s. It came after the Agile Manifesto. And like I say, when David created it, he drew upon some of the ideas from Agile, but also a lot of the other ideas. But I know Kanban is used a lot by Agile practitioners, and if we want something to put on our CV, we talk about Kanban as being an alternative path to agility. It enables agility, okay? But it's not just limited to being Agile. And this is something that we're going to talk about as part of the Kanban maturity model. So I think about the Kanban method as two sides of a coin. On one side of the coin, the Kanban method is about optimizing your existing process. So Kanban isn't something that we do standalone. we are applying it to whatever you're doing. That could be Scrum. It could be Safe. It could be Prince 2. Whatever it is, we're applying Kanban on top of what you're already doing to optimize it. So that's one side of the coin. And on the other side of the coin, it's about catalyzing change. And again, this is a big focus of the Kanban Maturity Model. At its core, the Kanban method is a change management method. So we're using it to catalyze change. So anybody that thinks Kanban is about stickies and WIP limits, well, there's a lot more to it than that. And I'm going to give you a little taster of what it is as we go through the talk today. So I mentioned that the Kanban method is made up of a set of principles and practices. It's not a framework. That's the other maybe insight from this first introductory section. A framework like Scrum, it defines roles, it defines events, it defines different artifacts. You don't get that with the Kanban method. We've simply got a set of guiding principles and practices. It's not a framework. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't prescribe what you should be doing. So on the right-hand side of this picture here, we can see the 6 practices. As we saw on the Mentimeter earlier, we recognize some of these: limiting work in progress, visualization. We've got other ones in there, such as implementing feedback loops, making policies explicit, etc. So we've got these 6 general practices. On the left-hand side are our principles, and these come in 2 sets. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail of these, but on the bottom left, you can see that we've got what are called the service delivery principles. This is all about that first side of the coin. What does it mean to optimize service delivery? And we've got principles there focused on the customer, focused on self-organization, and focusing on policies to optimize service delivery. At the top left here are the principles that are around change management. Start with what you do now. That's one of our core principles in the Kanban method. I mentioned we're not doing Kanban, we're applying Kanban on whatever you're doing now. So start with what you do now. We saw the word evolutionary on the Mentimeter question. So we talk about evolutionary change. And the other part of change management is acts of leadership, encouraging acts of leadership at all levels. So these are our underlying principles and practices. Again, just to sort of give you a feel for what is at the core of the Kanban method. So I mentioned that the Kanban method is a change management method, and why David created it was because of a lot of the struggles that organizations have with change. We see a lot of organizations adopting Agile. Maybe they're adopting Safe, the Spotify models, maybe some teams doing Scrum, and a lot of teams really, and organizations struggle with this. My next question for you is, why do you think this is? Why do so many change initiatives fail? Or put another way, why do we not get the benefits that we hope when organizations start out on their change initiatives? So again, back to your Mentimeter. I've moved the presentation on, so you should now see this question and you can start sharing your thoughts on this. Why do you think so many change initiatives fail? Yeah, some good stuff coming through here. Yep. Corporate obesity, that one appeared first, I think. I'm guessing that one is tied into some of these other things. I think I saw corporate bunkers as well, and trying to do too many initiatives at once. Management discipline has come up. Lack of leadership. Missing culture. Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah. Not starting with where you are. Not enough buy-in. Top-down implementation. Celebrating too early. Lack of sponsorship. What does that mean? Yep, rushing. Fear. Let's see. Yep, fear. Poor alignment with value. Not saying no. Agile is the goal. I like that one as well, where the change initiative is, we need to be agile. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? What does that mean for the organization? Agile should be a means to an end. So really, it's not about being agile. It's about getting the outcomes. Organizational inertia, I see. Give you 1 or 2 more seconds on this. Managers not understanding. Yeah, there's that as well. Cool. All right, we'll stop there. Good. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think there's definitely something around people not understanding. There's something around not understanding the change, but there's also not understanding the nature of change as well. So let's talk about that for a second. So I want to draw you this little graph. Some of you might have seen this, but it's a good way to kind of explain how change works and why we need a tool like the Kanban method and the Kanban Maturity Model. So what I've got here is some measure of performance on my y-axis. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could be velocity, it could be throughput. It doesn't really matter, but some measure of performance. And my x-axis is time. Now, some sponsor, someone high up in an organization might say that we're at this level of performance today at A. I want to bring in this change initiative, and the reason for doing it is to get to this high level of performance. We want to get to B. And the danger is that we think change works in this linear straight line. We can start implementing a new framework, new ways of working, and by a particular date in time, that's where we see the improved performance. I'm sure most of you experience that this is not how change works. We tend to see the curve looking more like this. Things start to get worse before they get better. And why this is, we get resistance, we get fear, we get uncertainty, we get the not understanding, all of the reasons that you gave me on that previous question. So there's a period of time where actually performance gets worse as we're implementing these changes. Now this dip, right, there's only a certain amount of time before our sponsors or management team are going to have before they say, this is not working, we need to go back. We need to stop what we're doing. Things have got worse, not better. This could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. But at some point, people are going to start getting nervous. And they're going to say, we have to stop this change. It's not working. We need to do something else. Or we need to go back to what we were doing before. Now, the problem is there is no going back. Once you've started a change initiative, some people are on board, some things have become part of the culture, some ways of doing things have become embedded. So there's no straight line back to A. So even if you wanted to do that, you can't do it. Maybe we've been implementing SAFe and we're finding that SAFe isn't a good fit for us. Let's do the Spotify model instead. Let's go with that. So each time we pivot and change direction, we're introducing another new change initiative, and we go through the same thing again. We start to see that drop off again. And this is where a lot of organizations end up in this spiral of change initiative after change initiative. I know some organizations that are on their 4th or 5th major agile transformation because they're coming in with this design framework and they're not seeing the benefits, and they're running out of patience and they're wanting to do something else. So the depth of this red line is proportional to the size of the change. The bigger the change is, the bigger the change in the organizational structure, new job titles, new restructuring, the bigger that drop off in performance tends to be. So this pattern has got a Japanese name. is called kaikaku, which is basically big designed upfront change will lead to this dip in performance before you start to see improvement. So this is how traditional change is usually done. Now the Kanban method takes a different stance. We take a stance which looks more like this. This is what we mean by evolutionary change. We're going to do a little bit of change. We're going to go through that dip in performance, but it's much more shallow, and we should start to see the benefits sooner. And then we introduce the next little change. So we're going through these small little steps to get to our improvement of performance. This has got a Japanese name as well. This is called Kaizen. You might have heard of this. This is the Kaizen approach. So when we talk about evolutionary change, this is the Kanban method approach to it. So this model is called the Satir curve, named after its creator, Virginia Satir, to describe this difference between big evolutionary change versus small step, big evolutionary change versus small step evolutionary change. Okay, so blue line, evolution, red line, revolution. So this is kind of like fundamental to the approach that we take with the Kanban method. The other thing to say, with the Kanban method, we don't really know where the end point will be. We are going through this idea of continuous evolutionary change. We might end up in a better place that we hadn't envisioned. We might get there sooner, but we're not really defining where that endpoint is. We're talking about what's the next piece of evolutionary change that we need to carry out. So this is a quote from a book written by David Anderson. This was the book which is referred to as the Blue Book. I'll show you that in just a second. And he talks about when you first implement Kanban, you're seeking to optimize existing processes and to change the organizational culture rather than switch out existing processes for others. I know I haven't spoken about the KMM a lot yet, but this is what we're working up to. All right, it's not just about putting in new processes, it's about changing organizational culture. So this is a quote from the Blue Book, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So that's all the theory around the Kanban method, evolutionary change method guided by principles and practices, which takes us on to talking about the Kanban maturity model itself. Now, let me just talk about where it came from and why. The Kanban maturity model is a relatively new concept. Why? Because Agile practitioners, Kanban practitioners in the field were seeing that Kanban was treated very superficially. Teams were using boards, sticky notes, and whip limits, and that's about it. They weren't getting the real benefits of Kanban as it was intended. So David and the Kanban community created this idea of the Kanban maturity model as this guiding principles, this playbook to move from shallow adoptions of the Kanban method to actually really get the full benefits of the intention of it. So what is the KMM? The Kanban maturity model, it's a model of organizational maturity. This is really important. We are not measuring the maturity of the use of Kanban, we're measuring the maturity of the organization. I'm going to say that again. We're not measuring the maturity of the use of Kanban, we are measuring the maturity of the organization. And hopefully once we get into this, you'll start to see what I'm talking about here. So as I say, the idea was to provide guidance for appropriate practice adoption. What we mean by this is most organizations, the context is going to be different. A lot of the challenges might be similar across organizations, but contexts are going to be different. So where we see some of those failures that we talked about earlier with change initiatives, what we've got with the Kanban maturity model is to understand a way or provide a way to understand where the organization is at a given point, and then provide guidance for appropriate practice adoption. Okay, what is appropriate given where the organization is on its journey? So the intention of this is to reduce the risk of those failed change initiatives. And like I say, the focus is not on doing Kanban, it's not to be agile, but it's to focus on what these three things: outcomes, practices, and culture. So what the Kanban maturity model is not. It's not about compliance, and it's not a tick box exercise. I know that the words maturity model can be a trigger for some people, and some people shy away from maturity models because they think it's about ticking boxes. CMMI is an example of a maturity model where organizations chase trying to be compliant, and they can certify themselves as a CMMI level 5 organization, but they're not really getting the outcomes that the organization wants. So it's not about compliance. It's not a target to get to. Again, it's focusing on those outcomes, practices, and culture. So the KMM was designed for these types of people: Agile practitioners and coaches, and Kanban coaches. We could group those, we could call these change agents, maybe. Also targeting what we call the improvement initiative leaders and product and service managers. So it's important to mention that the KMM emerged through the work of the Kanban community over a period of about the last 10 years or so. And it was kind of alluded to earlier on in that Mentimeter question that a lot of organizations with their change initiatives, their goal is to become agile or to implement a particular way of working. And that's not really helpful in terms of the organization itself and in terms of what it's trying to achieve. In terms of agility, what organizations need to develop is intrinsic agility. What I mean by that is not worrying about whether teams are doing stand-up meetings every day or whether the teams are working in sprints, etc. Is the organization adaptable? Do we understand the customer? Do we understand and are we able to react to the changing market conditions? Okay, so these groups of people should care all about that. So agile practitioners and coaches and Kanban coaches, these people have got tough jobs. They're the change. They're the change agents. But in order to invoke change, these people, they need to understand the current state of the organization, and they need to understand the organization culture and what the organization values in order to reduce the risk of those failed initiatives that we've been talking about. So it's about providing appropriate guidance for these change agents. The improvement initiative leaders, these are the people that are sponsoring the change. Those are the ones that are maybe saying we should move to this way of working. These people need a way, like I say, to evolve intrinsic agility, business agility, to get to those outcomes that I've been talking about. But they also need to measure and track whether change initiatives are actually making a difference. Are they successful? They need to see that the business performance is actually going in the right direction to justify the work that's being done. And then this last group, the product and service managers. These are the people that are working with the teams. They're providing services, they're producing products. They need more control of what's going on. Knowledge work is complex, it's difficult, it's unpredictable. So anything can give them more control and understanding of what's happening. Again, that's what the KMM and the Kanban method tries to provide. We talk about relief from overburdening. So focusing on the most valuable things, all those good stuff that we talk about in Agile. Part of this is managing demand. So not just prioritization, but we talk about managing demand in Kanban. And part of that is managing customers and customer expectations. To do this, these people, the product and service managers, need to understand the system, the Kanban system. How does the Kanban system behave? How predictable is it? And again, the KMM and the Kanban method provides tools for these people to answer those types of questions. So the takeaway from this little section, as a Kanban coach, we take a stance that there's no such thing as bad implementations. I've heard this spoken by lots of Scrum Masters, Agile coaches. This organization, the implementation of Scrum, it's not good. It's really bad. From a Kanban coaching stance, there's no such thing as a bad Scrum implementation or a safe implementation or a bad Kanban implementation. The problem from the KMM point of view is the practices that were being introduced were inappropriate for where the organization was at. So there's no such thing as bad framework adoption, only inappropriate practice adoption given the context. So this is the foundation of the Kanban Maturity Model. Before I start to go into the detail of the KMM, I'm just checking the chat window. It looks empty at the moment. I just wanted to see if there were any. Oh, there are some things in the chat window. Let's have a look.
Yeah, David, we got a question there from Xiaoming. I don't know if you want to take it right now.
Okay, it feels that the Kaikaku and Kaizen are a way of carrying on change initiatives, which could be applied to both Kanban and other Agile methods like Scrum. Are there any specialities of Kanban about these two concepts? Yeah, I see what you're saying. So the Kaikaku red curve that we saw, so stepping out, being framework agnostic, all right, the more change that you make, the deeper that red curve. Scrum is a framework. It's a lightweight framework, I give you that. The curve can be shallow. But if I'm going to do Scrum properly, there are certain prescriptions needed to be put in place. We need to have cross-functional teams. So that might mean restructuring. I need to have product owners. I need to have Scrum Masters. Analysts, you're no longer analysts, you're developers. Coders, you're no longer coders, you are developers. Testers, you're no longer coders, you're developers. So I am changing people's identity there as well. Right? So out of the box with Scrum, I'm making a certain level of that Kaikaku curve because of those things that Scrum prescribes. Right? If you're doing Scrum already, right, that curve is going to be less if I'm introducing Kanban practices. But like I say, the Kanban method approach is we're not prescribing particular meetings, we're not prescribing roles, we're not prescribing sprints, any of that things. Our first steps are just visualize what you're doing already, understand the current workflow, and then invoke evolutionary change, small step change. So hopefully you can kind of see why what I'm describing, I'll see a much shallower sort of effect by just doing visualization, for example, rather than having to do Scrum in its entirety. I hope that answers the question. I do see there's a question about CMI is a government. CMI is a government has been a federal contract obligation which has served a small community, although there are good things to harvest, including its content for Agile CMMI. Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Brad. Again, I hope that I'm not coming across like I'm attacking SAFe or CMI or anything else. Whatever an organization is doing, that is what it's doing. That's our start point with the Kanban method. Remember, start with what you do now. The point I was trying to make is some organizations will look at a maturity model and treat it like they want to get to a certain level, and it becomes about implementing the activity to get you to that level, and we lose sight of the why. What benefits are we trying to get to? So this is what this is the point. So I'm sure CMMI is great in many contexts, but like many tools can be misused. And thanks for your follow up on that, Brad, in the chat window. Okay. I'm just looking to Marco if we did want to take a break. We're about halfway through. Do we want to keep going, or do we want to give folks a short break? What do you think?
Hey, Dave. Yes, we normally go directly in this kind of workshop, but I would say like up to you. If you prefer, we can like have a quick break.
I think unless people say so in the chat window, let's keep pushing on because we can continue, and hopefully that means we've got more time for Q&A as well at the end.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
All right. So let's get into the KMM itself. I've mentioned the focus is on culture, practices, and outcomes. So this is what we refer to as the 3 pillars. These are our 3 pillars of the KMM. Outcomes, what we mean by that is what results are you getting as an organization? And again, I'm picking my language carefully here. This is an organizational change model, okay? We can use the KMM at a team level, but it's not going to be as effective as unless we're looking at the organization as a whole. We could apply it to a department maybe. Again, it depends on the size of your organization. But what we're looking at is organizational results. And this is from the perspective externally and internally. Not just what are people doing the work think or the people within the organization, but our customers. So we're focusing on customer outcomes here. The practices, essentially this is how do we get things done? What are the activities? What's our habits? What's our communication lines? What's our interactions? How do we get stuff done? And then we've got our culture. This is difficult to kind of explain, I suppose, but by culture we mean what's our established norms? What's our accepted behaviors? What's our underlying principles or values? And that's our 3rd pillar. And we bring all of these 3 pillars together in the Kanban Maturity Model, and we talk about managed evolution. We've talked about the Kanban method being an evolutionary change approach, but we're adding this extra word, managed evolution. What we mean by that is we're not leaving it to chance, right? This is the difference between evolution that happens naturally versus managed evolution, where we're coaching an organization through their change. Okay, so that's fundamental to the Kanban method. Oh, I should have warned you. Here is the big, bright overview poster of the KMM. I'm sorry if I've just blinded you with all these bright colors. But the KMM is visualized, of course, we're doing the Kanban method, through a series of posters. This is the overview poster. Lots going on here. I'm not going to go into all the detail here, but this gives you a nice overview of what the Kanban maturity model is. As you can see, we have got 7 different maturity levels. They go from the top, oblivious, all the way down to number 6, built for survival. And you can see that each one has kind of got a kind of descriptive name. So by oblivious, what we are describing there is the organization is oblivious to any sort of need for a process. People are just doing things. They're just getting tasks done. Level 1, we see the emergence of the team. People are working together in teams, so there's a focus on how teams work together. Level 2, we see the emergence of customer orientation, or what we might term as customer driven. We are moving away from thinking about what individual teams are doing to actually what does it mean to satisfy our customer. Level 3, we call fit for purpose. Fit for purpose is all about we are delivering according to customer expectations. All right, we've got a fit for purpose service. Our customers are satisfied. Level 4, we call risk hedged. What this is about is building in resilience. All right, at level 3, I might be satisfying my customers, but there could be a shock to the system, which means my survivability of the organization is in question. I don't know, for example, a natural disaster. hey, a global pandemic, something like that could come along and my organization is not robust enough or resilient enough to survive it. So that's between level 3 and level 4. Level 4, I'm now building resilience in. Level 5 is our market leader, market leading brands. I'm sure you can all think of some. Those go-to brands that we just associate with good quality and being the best in their field. And all the way up to level 6, which are those organizations that are so intrinsically agile that they are built for survival, meaning that they can continually reinvent their services and reinvent their products. So you'll see on the left-hand side here, we've got a column called observable behavior. So the way that the KMM works is that a Kanban coach can start to gather evidence to help them understand which maturity level an organization is at. And there's some examples on the left-hand side of the things that those Kanban coaches will be looking for. And again, we're looking at behaviors. Do managers just care about getting things done? That's a sign that we might just be at level 0 or 1. If there's no focus on the customer, for example. If I'm looking up at level 3, for example, I would be observing behaviors that are based on metrics, for example. We've got good, meaningful metrics that are prompting decision-making, for example. All right, so again, this is part of the assessments that a Kanban coach can carry out to understand where the organization is starting from. I'll point out this column as well. I don't know if you can see my pointer. Let me see if I can get a laser up.
Yeah, we can see the pointer there.
There we go. Yeah. I'm just going to be an even more glamorous pointer here. Here's my laser pointer. The values. I don't know about you, but when I hear the word values, I sometimes worry that people are talking about rhetorical, fluffy statements that we put on posters to motivate people, and it doesn't really mean anything. That's not what we're talking about here. This is, what does the organization value? Do we just value getting things done, value achievement? Or, for example, at level 5, does the organization value a culture of experimentation, a culture where there is equality of opportunity for everybody involved? All right, so again, as part of the assessments that the coach can carry out, we can look at the behaviors and we can look at the values. The other thing that we can look at as part of our assessments is what results are we getting? Are the customers satisfied? Are we able to set expectations? And this comes down to metrics, for example. How are you measuring whether your organization is fit for purpose? With the Kanban method, the default metric is lead time. How long does it take from a request, a customer request, coming in to that request being fulfilled? All right. If it's very unpredictable, if our customers are not being served well, all right, are we really getting the outcomes that we're looking for our customers? Okay, so that's an example of using that other pillar, the outcomes, to carry out our assessments. Okay, so this is an overview of how the KMM works. I wanted to show you this, and this goes back to what I was saying about how we can apply the Kanban method onto whatever you're doing now. This is an overlay between those 7 Kanban Maturity Model layers and Amazon's leadership points. So if you've heard about these Amazon leadership points, this is something that Jeff Bezos created. 14 guiding leadership points, guiding principles you can think about. And what the folks at Kanban University have done, they've looked at, if we were to follow these leadership points, where would that take us in terms of organizational maturity? Here, we can already see that some of these leadership points help push Amazon to potentially being a level 6 organization. And when you're thinking about what organizations might make it that far, I'm sure some of you might have been thinking about Amazon. So for example, I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of my favorite one of their leadership points is number 7. If you squint a bit, you might be able to see it says customer obsession. Okay, that is a leadership trait that is associated with levels 2, 3, and up to 4. Okay, so by living these leadership traits as guided by those points, that takes, you can see how these leadership points map to the Kanban maturity model. Okay, so again, like I said it before, I'm going to say it again, it's not the use of Kanban that matures, it's the organization itself. I don't know if Amazon are doing widespread Kanban in the organization, but again, we're agnostic around what you're actually doing. This is a KMM talk, but I'm going to slip this in here. There's something called the Fit for Purpose framework, which is, again, part of the body of knowledge of the Kanban method. There's a separate book and a separate training that you can do around Fit for Purpose. But if I just go back a little bit, all right, if I'm looking at these levels, really, if I'm an organization that wants to survive, provide a good service, we should be thinking, can we get to level 3 as a minimum? Can we at least be fit for purpose for our customers? So the fit for purpose framework is a guiding framework to help us think about how can we actually get to the idea of fit for purpose and beyond. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of this because this talk is about KMM, but there's 3 main areas of fit for purpose framework: identifying who our customer is, understanding who the customer is, their behaviors and their needs and expectations, defining your product and service, and then how do we meet these together? How well does our offer meet those customers' needs? And there's different types of metrics. In the fit for purpose framework, we talk about fitness criteria. There's something called health indicators, improvement drivers, and there's another type of metric which we try to avoid, which is called vanity metrics. Okay, so again, the KMM is linked to the fit for purpose framework when we're thinking about getting to level 4 and above. Okay, so we've talked about fit for purpose, but what does it actually mean? So let's go back to Mentimeter. And this is my next question for you. How do you define fit for purpose? What does fit for purpose mean to you? Give you a few seconds to think about that, and we'll start seeing the answers coming in. Okay, big word, quality. It's the first here. I'm going to assume this says adaptability. The Menti QR code is hiding the A, I think. Yep. Yeah. Not bloated service. Agility. And again, hopefully we're talking about intrinsic or business agility. Can we adapt to change? Are we getting feedback and are we adapting? Are we a learning organization? MVP I see there. Having the right tools. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. You've almost seen into the future because I'm going to talk about that in the upcoming slide just in a second with the tooling. Agreeing business value. Yeah, CX acceptance. CX acceptance. I'm kind of struggling with that one a little bit. What does CX acceptance mean? Don't know that acronym. Maybe put it, add that one to the chat window. and we'll come back to that. All right. Okay. So what does fitness for purpose mean? So yeah, we've talked about these things: MVP, quality, adaptability, not being bloated. My next question is, what stops us from being fit for purpose? If we can identify what fitness for purpose means, what stops organizations from being fit for purpose? What are typical barriers that stops you from providing the service that customers would expect? Customer experience. Yeah, thank you, Brad. So yeah, this is the next question on Mentimeter. Typical barriers that stops us from being fit for purpose. Waterfall process. Yeah, could even say maybe waterfall dressed up as agile, and you're not really in a position where you are regularly releasing and getting the feedback that you're looking for. Disengaged staff. Yep. Trying to solve too much, trying to do too much at the same time. Inability to change. Yeah. Yeah, that does ask the question, well, why are we unable to change? Hierarchical power has come up. We've got more around disengagement, people not engaged, lack of focus. Yeah, and there's a word chaos, just the word chaos has appeared. Nice, just give you a few more seconds, see if any other ideas come in. Okay. Organizational team setup, yeah. I mentioned earlier about the Scrum teams. Ideally, a Scrum team is cross-functional, but I see that as one of the barriers for organizations adopting Scrum. They're not really as cross-functional as they need to be. All right, good. So this leads me to perhaps my favorite part, or I think maybe one of the most valuable parts of the KMM. And again, this is based on experience by Kanban practitioners in the field. And this is called the barriers to adoption. And what has been identified, once as a coach you've identified which maturity level your organization is at, in order to move to the next level, like, we can't expect to go to A to B in a smooth line. Remember that. There are going to be resistances. There's going to be some barriers along the way. And what the community have done, have identified some general barriers, but also specific barriers to moving from one maturity level to the next. And I think this is a really powerful tool, because as a coach, if you are working with one of those change initiative leaders that wants to implement a new way of working, that wants to do a transformation, we can kind of hold this up and say, great that we want to do this, but this are the typical problems that we can expect to encounter. And if we want to get to B, we need to think about mitigation. What can we do to de-risk it, to mitigate these risks? So let me give you an example. This would be typical barriers from an organization at level 0 or level 1 trying to mature to level 2. What could we expect the barriers of adoption to be? We typically see a lack of a mindset towards what we call service orientation or customer focus. The mindset is very much focused on, what am I doing as an individual, or what are we doing as a team? For example, maybe we are a team of database specialists. Our focus is tuning, optimizing, coming up with the perfect database design, but we've got no perception of what that means for the end customer. And it's a mindset that has become entrenched. So how do we mitigate that mindset that people may be in. Another barrier to moving towards maturity level 2 is where teams are forced to use a standard process. Every team in the organization must do Scrum. Every team in the organization must use Jira, and here is your standardized template. Okay, unless every team in the organization works in exactly the same way, this can slow the team down. This can be a barrier. So again, we can engage with our leadership, our change sponsors, and say, if you want to get to level 2, we need to move away from this idea of standardized processes for every team. A lack of a flow manager or flow management. Now I'm going to whisper this one. Kanban is often thought to not have any roles. We do have roles in Kanban, we just don't talk about them yet. We don't talk about them until you're ready. There is a role in Kanban called the flow manager. And it is something that appears as the organization matures to a level 2. Remember, level 2 is customer focus, okay, customer orientation. A flow manager is not a manager of people, they are a manager of the work. They're focused on removing blockers. They're focused on making sure that work is not getting stuck, that dependencies are being managed, that work is not sitting idle. Okay, so it's, like I say, not managing people, but managing the flow of work. Again, this is something that matures, that appears later on when the organization has got more of that customer orientation mindset, and we've moved away from a culture of managing people to more managing the work and allowing self and managing the system. Okay. Another barrier towards maturity level 2, legacy tooling. Maybe you've got an electronic tool that is not fit for purpose for visualizing how work actually flows. There's some great tools out there, specifically for Kanban. You've got tools like Kanbanize, Swift Kanban, etc. There's other electronic tools out there that are maybe a little bit too restrictive. And like I say, if you can't visualize your actual workflow, that can be a barrier towards moving to maturity level 2. So this is just a sample of some of the typical barriers. And like I say, this is a good conversation that we can have with our change sponsors. If we really want to get to the outcomes that we're looking for at level 2, these are the things that we may need to address. So again, using the KMM as that guidebook for change. So as we've talked about this, I want to make it clear that the KMM provides guidance as an evolutionary change journey. I might assess an organization as a level 1. They might have aspirations to get to level 5. They want to become the market leader. All right, but we don't just jump from level 1 to level 5. It's an evolutionary journey. We would move from level 1 to level 2, consolidate there before invoking further change to move towards level 3. All right, this is an evolutionary change journey. There's no shortcuts. There's no silver bullets. There's no magic that can take us from level 1 to level 5. We have to take this evolutionary change journey. Again, pragmatism. And again, hopefully this is this tallies up with your experience on the change that you've talked about. When we talked about some of the barriers and difficulties with change earlier, I think I remember seeing something around doing too much too quickly. Again, that's one of the things that can really put change initiatives at risk. So let me talk about a case study, an example of how I've personally put the Kanban method and the Kanban maturity model into practice. I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to make sure that we've got good amount of time for Q&A. So here's the company. It was a retailer. They've got an e-commerce. Whoops, push my button too quickly. Well, I said I'm going to go quickly, not that quickly. So this was a company, they are an e-commerce and high street retailer. They've got a presence all across Europe. They supply a large suite of different products, everything you can think of, from pressure washers to dog toys to office equipment, you name it. They supply it usually through third parties. So think of them as kind of like a broker. They provide B2B and B2C sales, but they had been in decline over recent years. I was originally brought in to work with their IT teams, implementing Scrum, and I kind of started, although I didn't change them doing Scrum, I started using Kanban practices to make their Scrum better. Again, it's not Kanban or Scrum. I can use Kanban to enhance what the team is already doing. So following that piece of work, they wanted to make improvements in other parts of the business, and I was asked to help beyond IT with a fuller workflow with a focus on supply chain, procurements, merchandising. There was a part of the business which was responsible for onboarding new products for them to sell, essentially. So carrying out an initial assessment using the Kanban Maturity Model, looking at the behaviors, looking at the outcomes currently being achieved, asking questions to inform me, what do people care about? What do they value? Again, you're gathering evidence, different types of evidence as part of your assessment. Talking to people, not just doing a survey, but again, gathering different types of evidence. What we found was lots of long lead times. Again, this was our primary metric because they didn't really have metrics, so we focused on lead time. So for example, to onboard a new product typically would take 3 months. And when they were onboarded, the data setup was quite poor. For example, if I wanted to order a new product, I would look online, but the dimensions of it would be missing, for example. There were practices such as vanity metrics, I would say. They were measuring the wrong things. So one of their measures was the number of products that they could onboard. Not whether people were buying them or were asking for them, but how many products can we supply? They were very much into big upfront planning. For example, everything was based around a marketing plan, which was like 1 year ahead, which gave them very little flexibility. So the culture-wise, people working in individual silos, people weren't taking responsibility. Issues were escalated to managers, and it was kind of accepted that if things took 3 months, they take 3 months. So in my opinion, carrying out the assessment, these were all characteristics of a maturity level 0 organization. So guided by the KMM, what the KMM gives you is suggested practices to implement given where the organization is. Again, we don't want to do too much too quickly. What I did with these teams, and I'm going to call them a service, group of teams that provided a service for onboarding a new product. The practices were simply visualize, create a board with how the work flowed. Again, they had a particular electronic tool, I won't name it, but there was what the procurement folks were doing, what the merchandising folks were doing. We created one board for the lifetime of the request to onboard a new product to the time it was onboarded, the full workflow, the full service. Notice, although we're doing Kanban practices, we have not introduced work in progress limits. Culturally, my judgment was that they were not ready for that. All we did was to introduce the use of avatars on that visualization to visualize the workloads. Some people would have 8, 9, 10 items on their name. Again, too early to start limiting work in progress because culturally they weren't ready to accept that. We introduced other visualization techniques, including visualize things that were blocked. We introduced what we called a Kanban workflow meeting, which essentially we repositioned their daily stand-up meeting where each person would talk about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, to focusing on what do we need to do to flow the work. we would focus on a technique called walk the board, looking at the board right to left. What happened to this work item yesterday? What's going to happen to it today? Okay, so we're changing how we did that daily meeting. We introduce something called a flow review. Think of this like a retrospective, but including representatives from people across the whole workflow. So not just individual teams, but that service to set up and onboard a new product. So what we're doing there is we're catalyzing initial change. Based on the fact that we've got the visualization and meetings to talk about improvements, what started to emerge was what I would term pull coaching and acts of leadership. People, rather than waiting for managers to tell them what to do, right, in that flow improvement meeting, suggestions for improvement came up, but also people saying, we've got this problem, we need help, right? That is now giving me as a coach permission to start to help them. Right? If I go in and push change, if I push coach, it might be met with resistance. But through my visualization, through the act of having that improvement meeting, I'm now creating an opportunity for pull coaching. People are asking for help. So these are the practices that came out of that. The definition of some basic policies. So here's our Kanban practice of make explicit policies. So very simple things like defining when meeting times were going to be, like that daily meeting, because before it was kind of random. The types of cadence, the type of meetings that we wanted to do regularly, who needed to be there. Policies around the board design. I just created a very first rough picture of the board, and that was it. That was the starting point. Again, coaching people and allowing the teams to evolve the board design themselves. There was policies introduced around peer review. I mentioned one of the problems that the organization had was the quality of their product data. They themselves introduced a new policy of somebody from the merchandising team peer reviewing the inputs from the data entry team before the product was put into production. The behavior of managing work in progress emerged. Note again, we did not put work in progress limits in, but what we started to see was management change. Because we had the visualization, managers change from their behavior. What did you do yesterday? What task are you going to do today? To looking at the board, they can see what everybody is doing through the avatars now, but they can see where work is queuing, where it's blocked, where it's waiting. Their behavior changed from managing people to managing the work in progress and starting to deal with the delays. Okay, quite a big change of behavior there. Like I say, we start to see much better collaboration between the merchandisers and the data entry people. One experiment, and again, remember our 6th Kanban practice, framing change as experiments. One experiment that we managed to agree was to get somebody from the marketing department to be embedded in our team so that we could be flexible on marketing campaigns. I mentioned that we had this 1-year marketing campaign up front. The idea was we're going to have someone from marketing within the team to allow us to do tactical changes. For example, there might have been a big sporting event. Can we do like a product marketing campaign in the next 2 weeks to take advantage of that? And one thing, and again, this is something that the team set themselves, we were measuring lead time. And like I say, it took them about 3 months to onboard a product. What they were looking for was to challenge themselves. Can we do it within 1 week? They set themselves a service level expectation to be able to onboard a new product in 1 week. So I was coaching them for only a 3-month period, and carrying out an assessment towards the end of that period, we could see the signs of them starting to mature towards maturity level 1. Again, looking at those 3 pillars, the outcomes, we could see better improved transparency, less overburdening of individuals. Again, we didn't put WIP limits in, but the fact that things were visualized and we had the avatars just shown that they were just starting too much work. Because of that visualization and the way that we ran the daily meeting, there was a better collective understanding from everybody providing that service of that end-to-end workflow. Because the focus was on the work and not keeping people busy, we saw improvement in the lead times. And we saw a much better relationship with people outside of that service, our third-party suppliers, etc. I don't have the time to go into the detail of that, but there's some interesting stuff happened there. So the practices, teams using Kanban boards. We had a big physical board in the office for the people that will come into the office, as well as electronic tooling. We'd introduced the Kanban cadence of the daily Kanban meeting and the flow review. We're seeing practices of proactive blocker management, managing aging items. And like I say, we're now seeing a culture of collaboration across functional domains that wasn't there. People taking initiative, not escalating to the managers anymore, but just going and talking to their colleagues as part of the service. So we're now starting to see the characteristics of a maturity level 1 organization. So to wrap up, and I can see we've got some questions in the chat window. Hopefully we can see that the Kanban method and the KMM is a change management tool. At its heart, the Kanban method and the KMM, we are looking to optimize your current process and then looking to invoke and catalyze change, focusing on outcomes, culture, based on the practices. So if you think Kanban, like I say, is just about boards, systems, sticky notes, and whip limits, it's much more powerful than that. We're using the Kanban method and the KMM to catalyze improvements. The boards and the systems are just the tools that help us to do that. Okay. So like I say, the KMM is the underlying tool that the Kanban coach can use alongside the Kanban method as a guide for appropriate practice adoption, like I say, to understand where the organization is in terms of its maturity level and take it to the next level, focusing on outcomes, practices, and culture. Before I finish, a couple of formalities that I just want to show. If you want to know more, this is the Kanban University learning path. On the left-hand side, there's a class called the Team Kanban Practitioner. That's a one-day class aimed at anybody working within a Kanban service. We got the Kanban System Design and the Kanban Systems Improvement classes. Doing those two will earn you the accreditation, Kanban Management Professional. So that's for anybody that might be managing a service or a team. And then we've got the advanced level accreditation called the Kanban Coaching Professional. And this is where you can learn in depth about the Kanban Maturity Model. And there's another class called the Kanban Coaching, which is how to use the KMM, and a lot of the Kanban coaching principles are kind of gone into in depth there. Okay, so we've got these progressions. Other sources, I mentioned the Blue Book. This is the seminal, or the original work by Davids. This is a little bit old now, but it is the original definition of Kanban. If you are thinking about getting this one, hold off for a little while, I would say. There is a new version that David is working on. I'm not sure when it's going to be out, but hopefully it's not too far away. I'm hoping this year. This is the definition of the Kanban Maturity Model. It's in this book, the KMM. Just to give you, again, the idea of the depth, this book is over 500 pages long, so quite a lot in here. There's also something called KMM Plus, which is an online subscription. You can pay a monthly subscription, and it gives you access to the posters that I've shown you and lots more content, which includes the contents from this book. But if you want something lighter, we've got the official guide to the Kanban method, which is a Google away, and look like this. This explains the basic principles and practices. So that's all the content that I wanted to cover. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you've got some value. I'm going to stop my screen share. And I think I'm within the time box. We've got some time, some questions.
It was amazing, David. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. It was exactly the time there. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it was so easy to understand as well. I hope that I'm also saying, like, I'm quite sure that I'm also saying for in behalf of everyone here. We did get a few questions, David, for you on the chat. There is a I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing correctly, but Xiaomi Kai has wrote a few sentences there. Would you mind unmute yourself, Xiaomi? Maybe you can ask directly, David. Or maybe, oh, yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, the pronunciation was good. Yeah. I don't know where to start. I just left some notes. You mentioned that in your KMM model there are different like values on each level, and I think you took one or two examples regarding on how to measure it. It's just my feeling here, because I know that it's a common challenge that people for people that try to measure those values, but I guess it's quite hard, and I understand it will be different for different organizations. So for me, it will be interesting, and I'm curious to see a kind of suggestions of practical measurements for those values.
Okay. So, and I'm going to try and answer, I think Matthew had a question around this as well. So I'm going to try and answer two questions with one. Matthew's questions around what do you do when you see a hybrid in levels? My organization has bits from level 3 and 5. Okay, so we're dealing with complexity here, right? As Agilists, we know this. And when you carry out an assessment, it's not going to be a clean set of behaviors which points you to this being a level 1 organization. If you were to make a spreadsheet, for example, with all the characteristics of level 1, 2, and tick everything, right, you're not going to get these clear delineations. So this is why, although the KMM is available, you can subscribe to KMM Plus. You need some training and understanding of the KMM model in order to how to apply it. Because I could just do a survey, right? That is going to give and ask people, what do you value? What's important to you? What metrics are you getting? What do they look like? Okay, but that's only giving me one type of evidence. Okay, so unfortunately, you have to do a bit of work to carry out the assessment to understand where the organization is at. So in terms of values, because that's what you're asking about specifically, you're going to have some quantitative things, but also you're going to have a lot of qualitative things. But just asking the question of middle managers, senior managers, what is important to you? What do you care about? And you might even find that they come out with things that map to your organization. So, for example, the manager might say, we just need to get stuff done. If they say something like that, that is automatically telling me I could be dealing with a maturity level 0 organization. They could say, we value being innovative. We value people experimenting, trying out new things. We've got a safe to fail culture, and we value that. Again, people are telling me that is giving me qualitative evidence that that's what they care about. When I hear that, I now want to go and find out whether that's actually happening. What work are you actually doing? What innovations have you done? When you say you've got a safe to fail environment, prove it. All right. What happened last time a product goal or a sprint goal wasn't met? What happened? Were people punished? So again, I'm not just talking to middle or senior managers. I also want to talk to the people doing the work as well. So I'm carrying out my assessment, gathering evidence at lots of different levels. And like I say, we've got, I just showed you the curriculum that builds you up to become a Kanban coaching professional. So there's quite a lot of training involved to get you to that level. So yeah, it's not a simple black or white kind of thing. If it was, great, but unfortunately, the real world and complexity doesn't work like that. Did that answer your question? Does that kind of help?
Certainly, thank you.
Cool. And I'm hoping I kind of answered Matthew's as well. So yeah, you might see bits of level 3, 5 when you're carrying out assessments. You're thinking, what is the predominant evidence that I'm seeing? Is it predominantly level 3, 4? I might see bits of 5, but basically it feels like a level 4 because that's where I'm seeing most evidence is leading me towards.
Oh,
Thanks, David.
No worries, Matthew. Good to see you again, Matthew, by the way.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Our paths cross now again, Matthews.
I know.
Yeah.
Good content. Good content. Very good. Love it.
Thank you. How's your tomato plants doing, by the way?
Oh, do you know what? I've not planted them. I've still got the seeds. I know. I've been quite lazy getting the garden.
That's a maturity level 0 characteristic.
0, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted for sure.
There's some work to be done, right?
Yeah, a lot.
David, we got another question from Brad, and Brad is not here. He had left, but the question he did was, what metrics, KPI, OKRs are you finding most useful and widely accepted in your experience?
All right, good question, Brad. I'm hoping you get to see the recording so you can see my answer. So this takes us to the fit for purpose framework. We often talk about KPIs, and I like the way that David Anderson describes the fit for purpose framework and KPIs, because a lot of organizations they've got metrics and they're calling them KPIs, but are they really key performance indicators? The question that we ask from this Kanban stance is it something that a customer cares about? Okay, I could be measuring velocity and calling that a KPI. Does a customer really care what your Scrum team's velocity is? Probably not. Okay, so what I'm looking for is something customer facing, something that customers care about, because that helps me understand if I'm fit for purpose. The default with Kanban is lead time. Okay, most organizations, most customers care about, and we all get that question, right? I put my request in, when are you going to be done? So lead time is kind of like the default metric, right? I want to just pick some holes in Brad's question. What metrics are you finding most useful? So I'm imagining that he's asking that to me. As a coach, Kanban coach, that is not my question to answer. That is the question to answer for the organization. Okay, so for example, it doesn't care what I think. I'm the coach. I can help you think about this and maybe ask the right prompting questions, but I'm not going to go in with a predefined metric and say this is what you need to measure. You need to understand what is important to your customers. If you don't know, because again, that's a sign that you're at a low maturity level. The default, I'd start with lead time. Okay, but another example of a metric, maybe I'm a car company. Tesla is used as a good example. Tesla, one of their KPIs was cancellation rate. So Tesla had a particular problem where customers were ordering cars, but because of the long lead time, it was maybe up to 50 months, maybe even longer, for them to get delivery. Okay, so one of the metrics that they were looking at was cancellation rate. How many orders are we losing? All right. So the other thing I'll say on metrics is not to look at them in isolation. There I've just given you an example. How does lead time correlate to something like cancellation rate? If what Tesla did, they looked at how could they improve their production so they could get better throughputs of car production, so that they could reduce the lead time from 60 months down to 24 months, for example. I can't remember the exact numbers. And what does that mean for the cancellation rate? Does that bring that cancellation rate of orders back to a level which is acceptable for them for an organization? But if I just look at lead time in isolation, okay, I'm not really understanding what impact that has on customer behavior. So again, I've been a long answer, I know, but to summarize, the key metrics for me anyway, and for people from a Kanban background, what do customers care about?
Really good point, David. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. Yeah, we do have one last question here from Liz. David, it's how do the KMM levels relate, if any, to the complexity domains from Snowden?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if it does. I'd be interested to see how David Anderson himself or some other people involved in the development of the KMM would answer that one. But I believe that Dave Snowden's Cynefin model is kind of describing, I can see some overlap with the behaviors, because I can see how Cynefin kind of describes, are you in the chaotic state or the complex domain, and how you should lead there. So there's some overlap there. So I can imagine in terms of the leadership behavior, you could use the KMM to understand which domain you are in to, again, help inform what sort of practices need to be implemented. But I think the key thing would be, how would we actually get them adopted? Do I need to push them more? Do I need to, if I'm in that dangerous, complex domain where I just need to get to a place where we understand cause and effect, maybe I'm going to push practices more than if I'm in a different domain. So I think it would be more about the how, if I was looking at the Cynefin model. That's a great question, and probably requires a fair bit of analysis to look at how, which I've not done personally. Someone in the Kanban community might have. So maybe this is a topic for a future Gothenburg meetup. Find someone that has done an analysis of how Cynefin fits with the Kanban Maturity Model.
I am already doing my notes here just to make sure we have that next time.
Yeah, yeah. You know it's not going to be me though. So. But yeah, maybe I can make some recommendations.
Oh yeah, oh that would be much appreciated. Yeah. Look, I'm going through the list here. I don't think we had more questions, but I kind of just like quickly ask it around here. Do you have any questions maybe you have not written in the chat that you'd like to ask now to David, Tim? Oh, yeah, I guess, David, that, yeah. All right, it looks like that, yeah, it looks like that we don't have any more questions. David, I thank you very much for the time here. There was so much things that I have learned myself personally, and I'm sure that all the others here also have learned. And again, thank you for your time. There was like a lot of fun we had together. And yeah, I hope that maybe like we can see sometime soon in the near future, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I hear the weather is lovely in Gothenburg, so yeah, maybe one day I can meet you all in person. And yeah, we're slightly over the time box. I never said I was good at time boxing, did I? So apologies that we've run over slightly. So.
No, it was fun. The time went fast. When things are good, time just pass really fast, right? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying.
Yeah, David. Yeah, and if you ever want to visit Gothenburg, better be now, because the weather, yeah, as you said, yes, you know, it's great. So like, don't come in the winter time. I don't recommend that. Yeah.
I second that, Marco. Terrible in the winter.
Oh, All right. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, and I also thank everyone that has been participating, engaged with the questions, comments, and also listen to David today to today's workshop. Yeah, I appreciate everyone. I hope that you'll see you next time. And yeah, I wish you everyone an awesome evening.
Thank you, Marco. Say to you, and thank you, David. It was really, really insightful.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was beautiful. It was absolutely stunning. Loved it, Dave. And thanks for hosting.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Matthew.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.